Hello, everybody. My name is Paco Tovar, and I'm the Forest Biosecurity Manager at the Australian Forest Products Association. I'd like to thank you all for your attendance and interest, and also thank the organisers of the DIG conference for their kind invitation to allow me to speak to you today. Before I begin, I would like to acknowledge the traditional custodians of the land on which we gather today and pay my respects to their elders past and present. I extend that respect to any Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander peoples here today. Reflecting the themes that you covered in the two sessions before lunch, applied science and management and stakeholder community, in my presentation today, I'd like to tell you the story of how science has been applied to establish the Forest Watch Australia program. For those of you that may not be familiar with it, Forest Watch Australia is a post-border surveillance program 4 years in the making that has just completed its first year of operation. The program involves activities focused on surveillance for exotic pests of trees that may affect our precious forests. In short, its key aim is to improve Australia's capacity for early detection of exotic tree pests and diseases that have circumvented our strong border biosecurity measures before these cause significant impacts. So before we delve into the story, I think it may be useful to set up some context. What do we mean by forests? What trees are we talking about? While there are several definitions, at its simplest, a forest is a collection of trees that together create an ecosystem. Commonly, on hearing the word forest, we think of our native forests, such as rainforests, tall eucalypt forests, or our native woodlands. But for our purposes, the term forest also encompasses native and exotic plantation forests, and the collection of trees found in our streets, parks, and gardens that together form the urban forest. This is because often the exotic pests affecting trees impact across forest types. It is also worth highlighting that collectively, all these forests are assets and part of Australia's natural capital, with intrinsic environmental, cultural, and economic values. Now, what pests are entering and what forest types do they affect? As mentioned, exotic pests affecting trees may impact across forest types. Recent exotic pest introductions include giant pine scale, which can affect softwood plantations and the pines growing in our urban forests. Myrtle rust affects native species and also hardwood plantations. European house borer in Western Australia affects timber, but may also affect softwood plantations. And the most recent example, Polyphagus shothole borer, which affects a number of urban amenity species as well as native species. Now, why should we care? What is the issue before us? Now, at a DIG conference, I hope I can safely assume that I do not need to highlight the devastating effect that exotic pests and diseases can have on forests and their biodiversity. However, to a larger set of stakeholders, the first step in convincing them that we have a forest pest issue was to highlight the problem. To this end, a historical analysis was conducted that highlighted that despite Australia's well-regarded biosecurity system, throughout the 100 years between the estimated introduction of Phytophthora cinnamomi and the 2010 detection of myrtle rust, our two most devastating plant disease introductions, pests and diseases that affect our forests have and continue to enter on a regular basis. In fact, roughly 2 medium to high impact pests establish in Australia every decade. Now, these pests are entering. Where is the risk? What can we do about it? Now, we may at first assume that the risk of exotics is all coming from overseas, where these pests are coming from. But is this right? Being a federation, and in Western Australia particularly, due to our isolation from the rest of the country, an initial approach might be to simply ensure we tighten our own biosecurity and controls at a state level. However, as illustrated in this graph, where the orange arrows point to the proportion of exotic pests in each state that have come from other parts of Australia, I hope it is evidence that except for New South Wales, the risk to most regions in Australia comes from other states. The graph also illustrates that exotic pest entry through Queensland and New South Wales is the most likely pathway for introductions into the rest of the country. In short, the exotic pest risk for states like WA is over east, not in WA. Management of these risks at a state level would be futile. This is a national problem. Altogether, the analysis and evidence I just illustrated were critical in bringing states and territories to partner with the forest sector and community groups to establish a National Forest Pest Surveillance, now branded as Forest Watch Australia. That is, the science supported the idea of a national problem that needed a national solution with shared benefits for all the major stakeholders. Importantly to note, this is a formal signed agreement between all the parties, and it involves agreed governance, funding, and operational support arrangements. These arrangements are key for the program to be sustainable and ongoing into the future. Okay, so a program of activities was agreed. Now what? What should we do about it? Well, again, science provided the answer. An analysis of the exotic pest detections indicated that 71% of all the pests detected were detected through passive or general surveillance. That is, members of the public or workers out in the field that were not necessarily looking for these pests detected them passively. 59% of the pests were detected in urban areas. And more recently, an increase in expert-led surveillance in and around high-risk sites resulted in greater levels of detection. Unfortunately, the historical record shows that in most cases, the pest had spread too far to eradicate. So what can we do about it? Together, the conclusions from this analysis was that for eradication to be successful, early detection is key. Now, no biosecurity system is perfect. Despite our best efforts to minimise pest introductions, these are likely to continue from time to time. To this end, the program is adding a layer to our biosecurity system. The program's activities aim to increase the capacity to conduct expert and non-expert surveillance and reporting of exotic pests. Through the program, we hope to increase the rates of early detection of pests and thereby improve the chances of eradication of these pests before they significantly impact our forests. To focus Forest Watch Australia's activities, a list of high priority pest targets was compiled based on existing national priority pest lists. Dependent on the biology and all the methods available, different surveillance methods are used for the pests. These may involve use of lure-based traps, which contain specific pheromones attractive to the pest, conducting visual tree monitoring for signs or symptoms of an exotic pest, or simply enabling more stakeholders to report exotic pests by providing them with training and tools. So where should we conduct surveillance? Where are the areas where pests are more likely to enter? A combination of pest factors such as climate and host availability and pathway factors such as the type and volume of commodities, as well as expert elicitation, previous detection of approved arrangements, were all used to inform a pest pathways risk models. Outputs of the model involved spatial maps showing the relative risk of entry of the pests at different scales, including the top 30 risk areas in each state. Critically, the model told us that surveillance should occur in urban and peri-urban areas around our main potential points of entry, ports and airports. That is, surveillance in native forest or plantation forest areas, while useful for established pests, is not so useful for biosecurity pests. Once exotic pests are detected in these areas, it is probably too late to effectively mount an eradication campaign. Following the identification of high-risk areas, how do we undertake surveillance? One method conducted by specialist staff is high-risk site surveillance. This involves analysis of local tree databases, spatial analysis and ground truthing to identify locations within each of the high-risk areas that contains tree hosts that are attractive to the exotic pests. Experts then conduct annual visual monitoring and lure-based trapping at these locations. Forest Watch Australia also implements what we call stakeholder surveillance. Again, within the previously identified high-risk areas, stakeholder surveillance involves the program identifying people with a stake or interest in trees. These stakeholders are then engaged through provision of annual workshops, pest fact sheets, and online training with the resources to improve their ability to recognise unhealthy trees and or potential exotic pest issues. Finally, the program also provides access to a mobile-based electronic field guide of common and exotic tree pests, along with a reporting app. This enables all the stakeholders engaged through the program to easily identify tree pests and report anything that they think is unusual. Importantly, pest reports received through the application are examined by experts and a diagnosis provided. This is important to maintain engagement and, critically, to ensure exotic pests are identified at the earliest opportunity. Science will continue to be a part of Forest Watch Australia's continuous improvement process. Working with partners, key areas of improvement include risk analysis, especially post-border, so we can better identify the areas in our peri-urban and urban environments. Improve trapping and lures, so we have a broader range of traps available and increase effectiveness. Our host tree surveillance may be improved through remote sensing that better identifies high-risk trees through health change detection. Our diagnostics may be improved through in-field methods or diagnostic triage of the trap soups that we collect. Similarly, the data and science coming out of the Forest Watch Australia program will continue to be used in our engagement to convince more partners to join our effort. Strategic targets for engagement include the Australian Local Government Association, National and Indigenous bodies, Landcare Australia, and the Australian Land Conservation Alliance. To summarise, I hope this presentation has highlighted how the application of science has played a critical role in the establishment and delivery of the Forest Watch Australian program and its key activities. I'd like to acknowledge that today's presentation represents the collective work of the program's government, forest sector and community partners, as well as the individuals listed here. I also provide key reference that may be of interest to you. Feel free to contact the program or myself through the emails provided with any further questions, or if you would like to participate in surveillance or training opportunities. Thank you all again for your attendance and interest.
I mean, it's such an impressive list of stakeholders that you've got working on this project. Can you tell us a little bit about your process and the time frame that you looked at for pulling that together?
Sorry, is that you, Mia? I didn't catch the start of your question. Sorry, if you could do it again, please.
Sorry, hopefully that's working now.
Yes,
I
it
just
is.
was saying it's such an impressive, that slide where you've got all your different stakeholders and your partners for your project, and I think it's a massive win in this space. But stakeholder engagement is something that we all always talk about. And can you tell us maybe a bit about your process and your timeframes for pulling the project together?
Yeah, so in short, it took double the time than we thought. So I think we had 2 years to try and pull it together and get all the parties on board, and it took 4 years of hard yakka. But we thought probably halfway through the process, we could have got half the country on board, but we decided it was important for the sustainability of the program to have that national approach and just keep going and bring everyone along with us. So yeah, it was lots of meetings, lots of workshopping, lots of discussing the issues over a 4-year period. So a long and sustained period.
I've got a question. Any other questions from the audience? A question from Domini. Would like to know if the program has been updated.
Yeah. Which program? Sorry, like the program overall.
Okay. I'm not sure if you heard that through the microphone, but has the surveillance program been finalised, or is it still in the draft form?
No, so we've already implemented it, and so it's been 1 year of collecting data, and so with traps being put out and workshops run, etc. And we're just gearing up now to do the next year's surveillance. So our season is roughly October to March when we do the surveillance, and we try to run the stakeholder workshops towards the end of March, maybe even April. We're hoping to coincide with International Tree Day or something like that along the in that space, and also because at the end of summer is when the symptoms of any potential exotic pests are more visible.
Thank you, Paco. I'll just ask a quick question. Paco, such an important program. I think the problem is, how do you make sure it continues in perpetuity, So have you got any plans to try and make this a permanent fixture in the Australian biosecurity scene?
Yeah, so look, so we've got a formal agreement to have the program run for an initial 5 years, but the agreement itself was written rather sneakily, I guess, by myself, with the clauses that so there's a review process at year 3, and if all the partners are satisfied that the program is delivering its outcomes, the desired outcomes, then the program will continue on an ongoing basis, subject to funding, of course, and no one's got a crystal ball on that one. But the intention is that, and that's why it's a formalised agreement, that all things going well, it will continue going and build to better things.
Well, congratulations for your sneakiness. Well done, Paco.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.